This week, I got the opportunity to sit down with Mario Jurcic from Secure Recycling, and I really enjoyed this podcast. Probably because it wasn't your traditional quote unquote scrap podcast where we just talk about scrap the whole time. It was kind of a different twist than I'm used to. We got the opportunity to sit down and do a little deeper dive into his business and one man's vision of how he planned to change the industry by actually impacting people's lives. A great story also of how he broke into the electronics recycling industry and how far he's come in the last 2 decades. I hope you guys get as much out of this podcast as I did as Mario breaks down how he measures his efficiency and effectiveness with a couple key HR metrics. Enjoy.
Welcome to A Scrap Life, a podcast solely focused on the hustlers, grinders, operators, and business owners who live and breathe the scrap metal industry every day. We are the original recyclers, no suits required, just guts and hard work. Here is your host, Brett Eckhart.
All right, another Scrap Life podcast. I'm sitting here with a guy that I met on LinkedIn. I mean, if you know me, it's kind of my preferred method of networking right now than just meeting people at some of these conferences. But I met Mario on LinkedIn probably 2 years ago-ish, I'm guessing, somewhere in that range. And Mario owns a company called Secure Recycling. Mario Jurcic, good to finally get you on here. We've talked a few times over the phone. We've met at ISRI down in Nashville. We had a pretty good conversation. We were able to sit down, drink a beer, and just kind of enjoy each other's company. You've probably got one of the better stories in recycling that I've heard in a while. So I was super excited to get you on this podcast. So welcome, man. Thanks for taking the time out.
Pleasure to be here. I know it took a little bit of scheduling to get us on the same page here, but I appreciate your tenacity through that with me and patience, and pleasure and honor to be here with you.
It goes both ways, man. And you have a busy schedule. How many kids do you have?
2 boys, 3 and 5.
Yeah, so you're in that stage, and I wasn't that far. I'm not that far removed from that stage with a 13 and a 10. So, I feel your pain. You're just, it's everything you can do to start up a business, run a business, and then at home have a 3 to 5-year-old boys that are ready to rip the roof off the house.
No breaks, baby.
I had a shirt made one time, and it has a 3-wheeler, like a trike on it, and it says "all gas, no brakes." Like that's the way it is. I feel like you kind of live that life, and just kind of how your entrepreneurial spirit kind of shines through, at least when we discuss. So I'm not gonna fuck around much. I'm gonna get right into the story. And I just wanted, just kind of preface it as, Mario, I think, kind of started on the electronic side, and that's really probably where he cuts, most of his teeth right now. But you've got a lot of other things going on, and we'll get into it. But why don't you just give everybody here a little bit of background on, kind of how you got into this exciting world of recycled materials / scrap metal / recycling.
Sure thing. So I'll go way back, and if you need me to speed up, you tell me to step on the gas a little bit. I got no problem with stepping on the gas pedal.
Yeah,
but it goes back to high school. It was junior year in high school. Very committed to sports, not committed to academics. Appreciation for academics these days.
Yeah.
Just back then, it couldn't soak my attention. So the whole game plan growing up was, hey, I'm going to play professional soccer. And we had an assignment junior year of high school. It was some sort of internship. And at the time I was talking to a girl, and I said, hey, see, your dad has these big dumpsters outside of some machine shops, and my dad has one outside of his shop. And do you think he'd be open to me just following around for 3 or 4 days? And she's like, let me ask. So she asked and got back to me, said, hey, he's cool with it. So I was like, that's great. because I remember seeing growing up at my dad's machine shop. He has a small fabricating business. It's him and my brother. And growing up, we'd go there on Saturday mornings, 5, 6 years old. He was having me machine and deburr pieces, parts. And so was sweeping the floors, wiping the equipment down. But that box was always outside the warehouse. And it wasn't until this junior year of high school, we had this internship program that it was like, what's that box doing there? And so I also remembered asking my father, like, hey, what's going on with that box? He says, they pick it up and then they take it and then they pay me. I'm like, so you put garbage in there and they pay you for that? He's like, it's not garbage. It's good stuff. And they pay me good money for it. So
yeah. So the entrepreneurial spirit is kind of in your family, right? Your dad start this machine shop. Is he first generation? Is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in his story, first generation American, they immigrated from Croatia, and I have 3 older brothers, one of which is handicapped. So he required a tremendous amount of medication. He can't walk or talk. He needs 24/7 care. And when you move from a foreign country to the US and you don't speak the language, you don't understand the resources and whatnot that are available to you. So quite frankly, at least from what I remember him sharing with me, is there was no choice. This is what I need to do to provide for my family.
Okay. Okay.
So
it's in you. You got that hustle kind of that DNA gene is alive and well.
Yeah, for better, for worse. And I'll segue just a couple of quick stories from when I was a little kid. And it's been in me. Like I remember back in the 286, 386 computer days, we had those big 5 1/4 floppies, and one of my neighbors had a printer. And I said, hey, Michael, and we were gamers. I'm like, let's make a video game magazine, because we loved Game Pro back then. I'm like, let's make a video game magazine and sell it door to door. So we were like rating video games, printing it out with their printer. God knows what that cost. Probably pissed his parents off. Who knows? But they at least let us print it off, and we were going door to door selling our opinions on video games.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, there was a neighbor at a printing shop next door to our house. They had a parking lot. I used to clean the stones out of the lot, and they'd let me dumpster dive and take scrap paper, and he'd pay me a couple bucks. And then there was my older brothers buying fireworks. Then I'd break apart some bricks of fireworks and sell the individual packs of firecrackers till other parents showed up at my house asking my dad, what's up with your kids selling fireworks to my kids. So always a little bit of entrepreneurship.
You've always had some entrepreneurial, some salesman in you, and I think that those are the stories that I kind of like to reflect back on with some people and say, like, it's there's that thing is in most people that are in your position today. Like it's I mean, it's a common backstory. I mean, everybody's got their own twist to it, but there is some commonality in the fact of there's just always been that burn to sell, to kind of create opportunity.
Yep, exactly. And so fast forwarding again, or speeding back up to how I got to where I am today in terms of the industry. So I did this internship and just sort of explored the scrap metal business with him as he was going out and selling, and he'd drive me around the yard and explain the different piles and this and that and cut grades and prime grades. And I was like, boy, none of this makes any sense, but this all seems freaking incredible. Like, you got a locomotive here, you got this big equipment. I love the dirt and the dust and the smell. Like, I'm in. And he said, well, when you graduate, I'll give you a call. We'll hire you when you graduate. So, boy, it was between that period of my junior year and then graduating high school, I was like, well, I'm going to get a job somewhere else. Like, maybe I'll push. And I went to like local, discount grocery chain here, like just trying to push shopping carts. And man, they would like, I can't imagine how awful I was in terms of like interviewing. Yeah. But I didn't get hired to push shopping carts. My cousin worked at Best Buy, and I bypassed like one round of interviews, went to another round of interviews, and like still couldn't get hired. And boy, I was just destined to end up in the recycling industry.
We take all kinds. Just where people end up. Yeah.
it's seriously next level when nobody trusts you to push shopping carts at 17, 16 years old. So I graduated high school, and I think it was a day or two later, I got a phone call from one of the partners at the scrap metal yard. And he said, "Hey, congratulations, welcome aboard. And when do you want to start?" And I was like, "Whoa, I thought you guys would forget about me." He said, "Nope." He's like, "We got a lot of work to do. When do you want to start?" I said, "Well, whenever." I said, "Well, see
Yeah.
you tomorrow." Cool. I had, didn't understand to ask any questions about pay or what am I doing, but
Uh-huh.
somebody wanted me outside of the world of soccer, so it was pretty exciting.
So did soccer just never come to fruition? You just because I mean you and I were talking originally. Did what came of that or didn't come of that? Just
Sure. So I played at Lakeland, played junior college soccer ball, and at the same time was playing semi-pro. So I was paying for school. I was able to pay bills. I had two herniated discs when I was 18 in my lower back.
yeah,
Also a degenerative disc. And it just, in addition to that, my right ankle's been broken 3 times. And between those, it's just, you never fully recover.
yeah, heard
Some
that.
mornings you wake up, you walk fine. Other mornings you can't walk. And I thought to myself, well, actually, after Lakeland, I went to Ohio State to walk on, and I was down to a round of 3 guys from like 80 or something, and I played ball with a bunch of those guys. They didn't take any walk-ons, and the coach pulled me aside. He said, "Hey, next year you're going to play in spring camp with us, or a summer spring camp. I can't remember at this point. It's been a while." And he said, "Just come ready." And I was in the best shape of my life. Buddy of mine had called me to play pickup soccer on a Sunday. It was like 3 weeks before I started training with the varsity team at Ohio State. And boy, was I an arrogant prick on the field. I really embarrassed this guy, put it through his legs 2 times in a row. There was like a minute left on the clock, and he slide tackled me from behind, broke my ankle again. And that was about, I think he needed 3 months for the swelling to completely go down so they could actually do a procedure, which should have a 6 to 9 month recovery. And I
That was
called the
that.
coach. That was that.
Yeah,
I called the coach. I said, "Hey, just want to let you know, got to go get looked at by the doctor." And then I learned at that point, I'm just another number.
yeah.
And my own arrogance got in the way of my future. And that was it. So from that point, I was like, I really need to put all my energy into my business.
And I want to circle back to that. The reason why I wanted to bring that up is, and because I want you to get back to your story, but I want to circle back to the value of team sports in running and operating a business, because I feel like I've had this conversation with a lot of other people, and individuals that have played team sports, there's something there to it. So I just want to make sure that we kind of covered that, and I'll let you get back to your story, but make sure we circle back to team sports and kind of the value of organizing an operation.
Yeah, team sports are huge. I mean, I got a late start on sports, but generally speaking, I stayed late. I got there early. I put in the work at home.
Yeah,
I put in a lot of work at home, and that was the first time in my life I was really setting goals. And excuse me, nobody was really there to tell me, "Hey, here's the goals you should go after." It was stuff I was setting up on my own because I didn't want to be like everybody else, and I loved it, and I was going to show everybody how good I was.
yeah, I love it. I love it. So you graduate high school, you're obviously playing soccer, you're working, you're making some money, right?
Yep.
And you're working at the local scrapyard. I assume it's local, it's not a big
Yep.
national brand.
Correct. Local.
Yeah. And so you're learning the materials. They got work for you. You didn't negotiate your pay. And here we go.
Yeah, I'm getting I think $6 or $7 an hour under the table. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was going to school full time, playing soccer, and working damn near full time. And I love the business. So the scrapyard that I worked at, they had an asset recovery division for machinery and equipment. So buildings might get demolished. There might be a chemical plant or a manufacturing plant. You have a bunch of bare bones leftover pieces, parts, and equipment. Well, some of those items might have value beyond scrap. So I worked it was technically a separate entity from the scrapyard, but within the family of businesses. So, my first day, they put me in this I don't know, 100,000 square foot warehouse with broken windows, no lights, if any lighting at all, really. Uh, Pigeons crapping everywhere. And boss rolled up. He said, "Hey, I'm going to bring someone over to show you how to drive a forklift. His name's Willie. And there's a bunch of these, I think they're Rosemont valves. You're going to catalog all these in these boxes. You're going to tell us what we got, how many we got." Cool. I said, "Sounds amazing."
Yeah.
So over came Willie, showed me how to drive a forklift, and he said occasionally I'm going to have to torch cut some things. So here's how to cut with this system. And then he left, and it was me in a warehouse.
Nice. You spent a lot of time with you in a warehouse, right?
Me in a warehouse, lots of time on my own, probably for the betterment of society, I guess, because no one would hire me to push shopping carts. But unbeknown to me, I was putting together processes and systems to efficiently receive, to efficiently process and locate and keep accurate counts of things.
Because they were bringing you other stuff, not just those valves. They were bringing you, and once they realized you could do that task, they're like, okay, well, let's let's start bringing them more material, letting them process and catalog other items, right?
Yep, correct.
Okay.
So it eventually got to the point where they would communicate, what do we have coming in and what's going out, when's it going out. So it was pretty cool. I was driving, I think it was like a 40,000 pound capacity forklift at the time. So I was driving, a little 4,000 pound cap up to a 40,000 pound cap. And I learned how to do rigging on my own because, it wasn't just Gaylord boxes of material. It was, lathes that might be 30 feet long and awkward. And so I had no idea I was going to learn how to rig or, unloading, some sort of heating element that it's tubular and it's on blocks and it weighs 30,000 pounds and you're unloading on a slope.
Yeah.
Like nobody's there to oversee me. They're just letting me know, hey, this truck's coming in. You got to get the shit off the truck and in the building. And then you learn how to navigate huge items that are, 1/3, 2/3 wider than the door frame, how to get it inside a building. So, it was, man, it was,
it's like trial. It's the ultimate trial by fire. Like there's no books that you're going to read on. There's no college courses that are going to teach you like how to do what you're doing, man. And that's the beauty of what our industry offers, right? And these companies, these small, medium-sized companies that are like, yeah, we need guys, we need help. Like, let's go. We just need someone that's young, that's got a little grit to them, that wants to get shit done, and let's go get it. I think that's that youth element that provides so much value. And I think we were just talking about how important it is to get the youth fired up about our industry in one way or another. And not everybody's built to do that job that you were just talking about, but there's a lot of kids out there that would eat that up. I think you're not an anomaly in the fact that you enjoyed doing that. That somebody gave you the I say the rope to go out and like make shit happen. I think there's a lot of that missing, right? And you can call it because of the red tape or insurance requirements or all the stuff that's probably transpired since then and today. But there is a youth element out there that still loves to do that stuff, and we just got to make sure that we provide an opportunity for that to happen. So keep going, my man.
Yeah, and we were talking about that before this podcast, engaging the youth, and I was giving you a kudos. There's several of you in our industry doing that because there's so much information out there. These kids can't get their hands on this stuff with a whole lot of ease, right? Because it's not as interesting as a porta potty fight at a concert in Pennsylvania, right? That's the stuff that gets shared.
Can I ask you a question that's like on a sidebar? Like, do you think that it's almost the funnel of information that's just coming, and sometimes it's not even like valuable information, it's just like videos and like memes and just the amount of just the volume of this craziness that's coming at these kids, right? On a daily basis. Like it's almost to the point where it's like, I look at it, I'm like, holy cow, like this is too much shit, right? Like I can keep my very narrow. And I wonder if that plays a role, you know?
Well, we're adults and our brains are developed. Like we just had an issue with my 5-year-old. He was wild on Sunday. He gave me 50 minutes of it. And I'm talking to my dad about it. I'm like, hey, like, there's no way. I'm like, was there any chance when you were me and I was him that you would do what I'm doing? He's like, no. He's like, that wouldn't last. And I said, well, you know what's different though is when I was his age, we had 4 channels and there was never really anything interesting on TV. And I
Yeah.
didn't have this many toys and this many choices of things to do. This poor kid's damn mind is on overload with information. I mean, he's watching the stuff he's into, which I'm happy about. You know, he's watching fishing. He's watching these shows with birds and bird calls. Like we're in the middle of the woods, and he hears something. He goes, "Quiet." You know, what do you mean quiet? He's like, "Did you hear that? Hear what?" He's like, "That's a pileated woodpecker." Like, hey, woodpecker. He's like, "Look, oh, it's over there." You look up, and he's like, "See that one? That's a female." I'm like, "How did you know that's a female?" Like, so I'm learning about birds and all this stuff from
Uh-huh.
my 5-year-old, but the amount of information it's got to
Coming
be
at these
overwhelming on
kids
their
is
minds.
crazy.
So like,
Yeah.
and it's not just the poor kids. Like, shit, I found myself on Facebook a couple days ago, like 20 minutes in the black hole because the videos loop. It
Yeah.
never ends. It goes from video to video to video, and before you know it, it's been 20 minutes. I'm like, off, got to stop. And
Yeah.
it's
And so it's
you still got
important
to
for
tell
us
life.
too. Like it's important for our generation, like us in the industry, like we're competing with that noise, right? And so we have to like I'm a big proponent of like stuff like podcast videos, like we're competing directly with that. We have to get our shots in, right? As what I call it. Like get your information out there, get your licks in because there's more coming, right? Like we as an industry have to get our, what's cool about what we're doing, what's where the opportunities lie, and I think we got to get our shots in. So, all right, I'll stop cutting you off, man. But anyway, so going through the warehouse, you're doing the deal, you're learn rigging, what's next after that?
So we hit a point where some computers come in the warehouse, and I just remember my boss saying, "Hey, we gotta get this shit out of here. We don't want this stuff out in the yard. It's got to go." And I was blessed that growing up, my dad always made sure that we had a computer in the house. He was big on technology for us to learn it, and I don't know if that was a big immigrant mindset. You know, we didn't
Mhm.
have a lot of stuff growing up, but it was important that we had a PC. So,
That's
I was
cool.
very familiar with PCs growing up, being on DOS and, just learning how to read. And I was already typing stuff out on in MS DOS, right? So,
Yeah.
um, I was like, well, I know some things about computers. I'm like, what happens if I just take these computers off your guys' hand? And he said, good, get them the hell out of here. So, it's a couple pallets and called my brother up because he had a pickup truck. I said, hey, man, I got a couple pallets I want to get brought over to the house if you don't mind. And take it to my parents' house. And they're kind of like, what's happening in the garage? And I said, I got some computers here. I'm going to take these apart and going to figure something out. And so I ended up rebuilding a bunch, sold some on eBay, sold some pieces parts on eBay, and then the scrap pieces parts sold it back to my boss.
Nice. So that was your first experience in electronics recycling.
Yeah, that was like 2004, 2005.
Okay. Okay. So you've been at it for a while, like, and that's what I'm like, don't get it twisted, guys. Like this is this this has been going on for a while. So what I mean on the deal like that, I mean, did you make good money on it? Did your eyes light up? Was it super profitable? Was it like, I mean, was it enough to kind of get you motivated? Like, hey, I need to take a hard look at this.
So profit wasn't my driver. It was the opportunity that was the driver because
Okay.
so money, did I make money? The answer is yes. But knowing what I know today, I don't have any real overhead. I wasn't paying workers' comp insurance. I didn't have any insurance. So
Yeah.
all that profitability is hyperinflated. But at the time it's like, whoa, yeah, there's profit here, but holy shit, there's a huge opportunity here. There's going to be massive amounts of this stuff coming up the pipe. So
Okay.
when I sold the stuff back to the yard, I went back to one of the bosses there, one of the partners, and I said, hey, I got this idea. Remember those computers? And I said, I got this idea for a business. And he said, listen, I don't want to hear it. If that's what we want to do, we're going to go do it. We don't need you to go do it. So I suggest you go back in the warehouse and get back to work. And this is the rated G version of what he said to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. How and how long had you been working there at that point?
About a year and a half or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what he heard, uh, which I sort of got confirmation not too long ago, but I think what he heard was I was going to compete with them.
Okay.
And what I was saying was, and it literally said like, hey, we could, and I'm like 19 years old. I'm like, hey, we could all be partners in this. You guys have warehouses, facilities, metals contacts, like, and I'll drive this. I will take this. And he said, no thanks, we don't need you. And I ended up leaving the office after his face turned so red from ripping into me and he ran out of breath. I just looked at him and I said, all you had to do was say no.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny reflecting on that. That's been one of my superpowers, I think, in life is just, man, I'm really hard to piss off. Like, and that superpower is also a tremendous weakness because sometimes somebody will say something and someone will look at me and go, hey, they probably shouldn't have said that to you. And it's like, well, sticks and stones may break my bones, but your words will never hurt me. So
Yeah.
I left with my head high. He didn't beat me up, and maybe he thought he was going to beat me up. And I was like, okay, onward.
Yep. So you left, I assume, and then what's the next
I'm,
step?
I'm a glutton for getting shit on like that. So I
Yeah.
stuck around for a little while. I really liked the job. I liked the boss, even though he was an asshole to me about that. But they really took care of me. They respected me. They gave me a tremendous opportunity. And so I ended up leaving in between the point that I was going from a community college to Ohio State University. And this is kind of the exciting part, sort of the salesmanship before I even knew I was selling. So a friend of mine called me up on a Saturday morning. He's like, hey man, I'm up at the library at the community college. Can you come give me a hand with my resume? I don't remember what time, but it was early. I was like, yeah, man, I'll come up, give you a hand in a few minutes. So drove up there. I had a shirt on with a pizza stain on it, shorts, sandals, a little bit of a train wreck.
Yeah.
And I don't know why he called me for his resume. Like, I failed 11th grade English. So in my senior year, I had 11th and 12th grade English, which is weird, but I
But you
did
got it done. Yeah.
got it done. Um, so I'm helping him with his resume, giving him some feedback. And we're in the computer lab and somebody pulls a PC out from next to us. It was like divine intervention. I'm like, oh, would you look at that? I said to my buddy, I go, hey, can you hold on a second? I got to go ask her what she's doing with these. So
Yeah.
follow her around. She pulls another PC out. I go, excuse me, what are you doing with those computers? She's like, oh, I'm putting them on the cart over there. I'm like, well, yeah, I got it. I understand they're
Uh-huh.
going in the cart, but like what's happening with them? She's like, I don't know. I don't know really what happens with them. I just put them on the cart and I take the cart to the warehouse. I'm like, well, I'll be damned. My mind, a warehouse is a scrapyard warehouse, like, cause that's all I
Yeah.
really know at the time. I'm like, well, this college has a warehouse. That's incredible. Who knows more? She points at some lady on the other side of the lab. Like, she might be able to help you. So I walk over. I go, excuse me, ma'am. I understand these computers are going on this cart and this cart goes to the warehouse and I'm trying to figure out who's responsible for the stuff in the warehouse. She's like, oh, that'd be procurement and purchasing. I'm like, okay, where would I find purchasing and procurement? That would be the A building. A was the administrative building. I'm like, that's cool. And it's Saturday morning. I'm like, well, who would I talk to? They're like, oh, gentleman by the name of Dale. I'm like, you think Dale's here today?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dale's always here on Saturday. I'm like, my man, we're
Yeah.
cut from the same
Let's
cloth.
see what's up with Dale.
So I tell my buddy, I'm like, hey man, I'll be right back. I promise I'll help you wrap this thing up, but I got to go talk to some guy named Dale in the A building. So I mosey on over to the A building and I knock on the door and the proverbial like 90s boss man with the big leather seat. Like you can't even see who's on the seat till they turn around.
Yeah.
I knock on the door and I just hear a voice go, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Absolutely, more than you know." And he just slowly turned around in the chair and gave me sort of a bewildered look. And he's like, "Well, what exactly can I help you with?" I said, "Well, I have an idea for a business that I want to start. And without your yes today, I can't start my business." So he's like, "That's one of the most interesting inquiries I've had here in my career. Why don't you have a seat?"
Yeah. And that's how it started.
That was the first deal that I landed. And I didn't know that I was even negotiating. So
So just real quick though, and
yeah,
like I want to bring this up because I think it's important, is that just it goes to show you like people that are opportunists, like other people just see a computer going by and a lady's hand going onto a cart, right? But like people that are opportunists, they're like, I wonder what they're doing with that cart. I wonder where that cart goes. I wonder how this, I wonder that, right? And maybe if you hadn't had that previous experience of electronics and like breaking them apart in your garage, maybe you wouldn't have thought twice about that. But in general, I feel like whatever your wheelhouse is, like if you're a true opportunist, you know, and you and I have had this conversation. This is how I started my tire recycling business. Is I was just getting piled on with tires through the course of my business, and I couldn't on the recycling, the scrap side, and I couldn't figure out like a good spot to go with them. And I'm like, well, fuck, I can't be the only person with this problem, you know. And then the next thing you know, like I'm getting tires, you know, and I'm trying to buy a tire shredder and I only bring that up because like that's how like our minds work, right? And so many people in our industry, like that's how they got into it, or that's how they saw a need that they didn't even know it was a need. They're just like, well, why is this happening? You know? And that I always feel like that's a true kind of entrepreneurial spirit, you know, within an individual is they just see things a little bit differently. Some people see a problem and other people are like, there's like something there that could like other people probably have this problem. So maybe we should try and fix it, you know, or whatever. And maybe at that point it wasn't quite a problem for you seeing that cart go by or that lady walk by, but you knew that if they're going to a warehouse, they probably were a problem for somebody, right? At that point. And so, all right, let's keep this train moving. That's just my 2 cents on your story.
thank you. And you're not too far off. Well, you're right on the mark actually. So the only difference in my mind wasn't so much that there's a problem. It was there's something happening with it, and I have to figure out what's happening. And I could probably, and this is where sort of that youth comes in. It's like, well, why couldn't I do it better than who's already doing it? Like, what's going
Yeah,
to stop me from doing it? And I don't even know what it is they're doing, but I could do it better. Why the hell not?
yeah,
You know, you got clothes, roof over my head, and 3 squares a day. I'm all in. So for me, it was exploratory. So I'm sitting there, and he asked me, why are you here? And I said, well, I want to start a computer recycling, electronics recycling company. And I noticed somebody pulling some PCs out, and I'm trying to get more information about what exactly you guys do with these things. And like somebody from the lab sent me your way. They said, you're the man. And that's what brings me here.
yeah,
So he walked me through everything he was doing, who they were working with, the documentation they were receiving, and which was really cool to me because I never had any sales training or anything, but I was just sort of naturally, because I was so curious, I was asking all of the right questions. I cared and I was curious.
yeah,
And I think he got a sense of that too. And again, that sort of youthfulness and like, semi-lost puppy look on my face as I'm just like in this whole new world at this point. I've never been through anything like this. This guy was probably a couple years from retirement, right? Like he's been
mm-hmm.
a was a professional veteran procurement guy, beating everybody up on price, doing all the right deals, and
Yeah,
comes this college kid, like really not put together, but boy, does this kid wants to start a business. So, kudos to him for giving me the time of day. But he's telling me what they're doing, how they're doing it. And then we hit this point where he goes, So this is what we're paying. I think it was like 15 cents a pound to get rid of these or properly recycle these assets at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, I don't have anything. Like I have nothing, and not
Other
even
than
a
the pizza
drill gun.
stained t-shirt.
Pizza stain. That's it. So he discloses what they're paying currently, and he just looks at me, and it's quiet for, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 seconds. And he goes, well, what do you think you could do it for? And the terrible businessman that I was back then, I said, we could do it for 2 cents. And he reaches across his desk. We shake hands. He's like, you got a deal. Of course, I missed some other important qualifying questions along the way.
Yep.
He goes, well, when can you pick up the first load? And I said, that's a great question. What's the first load?
Yeah.
So
What's it comprised of, and where do I pick it up, and how much is it?
yeah, then I learned about payment terms. In my mind, it's operating like a scrapyard. Well, I'm going to pick the stuff up. You're going to weigh it, and you're going to give me 2 cents a pound. Well,
Yeah.
no, I didn't know what net 60 was. So, and I also didn't realize like deadlines to get the stuff off the property. And I didn't realize how much volume there was. I don't know, there was more than a semi load that he's like, I need this out by, next week or something. Again, I don't remember all the specifics of the details, but I remember thinking to myself, and I remember thinking like, holy shit, but I never thought I couldn't do this. There was never a time where it was like, I can't do this. It was just, holy shit. I mean, everything was a holy shit moment, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So I left there. I'm on cloud 9. Now it's like, okay, I need a unit. And my dad was in a multi-unit facilities. I'm like, hey, I need your landlord's number. I got to call this guy. I need space. I got some money saved up. And
Yeah.
so I call him. My dad's like, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm starting a business. I just landed this huge deal and I got to get things rolling. So
Yeah.
I call a landlord and he's like, hey, I got a couple of spaces available. They're not very big. And I'm like, well, if they're not big, I don't have a lot of money either. He's like, well, how much you got? I'm like, I got like $700. He's like, perfect. That'll be your first month's rent. We'll go month to month. So met up with him, gave him his money. My dad had 19, fortunately, he was like 5 or 6 units over. He had like this 1970s Heister that the only way to really turn it around, the only way to use it in a unit, I would have to like turn around outside to maneuver it. It was like a 747 for the size of the space. I was only in like 700 square feet or something like that. But asked my brother, I'm like, hey man, can I borrow your pickup truck for a couple of runs?
Yeah.
Which was more than a couple of runs. Big brothers are for. So threw him a couple bucks for gas and the truck. And, really the goal, there was no business plan. There was no SWOT analysis. There was nothing. It was just, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure out. And as long as I make more than $7 an hour, I'm the richest man on planet Earth.
Yeah.
That was legitimately the mindset.
And that speaks to, I mean, we could go through, but it just speaks to like the hustler mindset too, right? Anybody that's ever started a business, regardless of like what the industry is, like there's always going to be those like that moment where you're like, I can do that, I can do this, I can do this, and all of a sudden it starts going like, okay, well, maybe there's a little more involved than I thought here or there. But as you get like your tolerance, I say like it's like a drinking, right? If you've never drank alcohol, but you drink 2 beers, like you're going to be feeling pretty good, right? But if you're a regular beer drinker, you're used to drinking 10 beers a day, then a couple beers, don't even really affect you, right? But as starting a business or being an entrepreneur, it's like being a first-time drinker. Like you're just, it's coming at you like 8 ways sideways, but you don't even realize as your business develops and as you grow, that those were like little, kind of little concerns, but at the time they're big because you're building up your tolerance to take on more. You're building up your tolerance but at the same time, you're still excited. It's like it's the first time you ever drank a few beers with your friends. Like it's an exciting time. Like it's like there's an excitement involved in that, And so I kind of there's just so much about that story that I like. I think it resonates probably with so many people that are those, like I say, a first generation, on business starter, first generation entrepreneur, where they're just, started their own thing, and they're just learning how. They're learning how to take it on, but they're excited, and I feel like that's where, you build up that tolerance to, like, let's say you take it to where you are today, I mean, they're like, highlight a few steps in between there from that big get out the gate and to where you're at today. Like
So you're,
what's some of your bigger highlights in like your highlight reel? That's a big one. That's like your first state championship or something like that, right? I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, that
yeah,
big, getting the Ohio State account, like that's kind of what gave you a taste for
yep,
the future, I assume.
yeah. So I'll clear one thing up. Sorry, I
Yeah.
wasn't clear on it, but it was the community college
Community
account.
college, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the highlight, and then just figuring it out and getting a bunch of friends to come and help. And the scrap metal yard that I had worked for, they weren't very supportive. I mean, they initially were supportive, and I think they had seen, like, Mario's going to get some legs with this, and then they weren't very supportive, and they ended up turning into a customer like 4 or 5 years later or something like that. So I think I proved to them a couple things. One, I'm going to be around no matter what you do, and two, I could add value to your business and not be on your payroll.
Yeah.
So that was nice to be able to do that. So I say, early on, that was probably a highlight, but there was just some big steps, like, geez, I moved the business multiple times. And I think this is where you and I, this is why I have tremendous appreciation for you, where the fork in the road for me went one way and it went the other way for you. I hired friends and family almost exclusively. So, like, if you got hired, you either knew someone that worked for me or you knew someone related to me. And,
Yeah.
it went well for a while. And I learned sort of the pains of that because, and I'll certainly own my part, I didn't know how to navigate it properly. I was likely a very shitty boss early on. It took a few years till I picked up a mentor, someone who had a pretty dominant business in the area I was in. And I thought he was very successful, and I relied on him to sort of coach me through being a successful entrepreneur. And I thought, well, I have to be like him to be successful. And
Hmm.
I couldn't be him, but I was trying to run my business like him, and I was
Yeah.
miserable. The business was growing just because of where the marketplace was with the industry. I had friends and family, and the things I could share with you, it's like, well, when I really needed their help, my friends and family would deliver every time. If I didn't really need their help, they were, it's like I'm dragging them through the mud. And, Mario's such an asshole. He's the worst guy to work for. It's like I can never get the consistency that I needed. And they were all smart. They were all talented. They're all good people. It was, I would say at the time, probably 75% me, but I didn't get enough from them to be like, hey, you really could approach this differently. It was just, mouths and eyes shut, and we're not going to give you any feedback because I wasn't approachable. But I was also running a business in a way that wasn't authentic to me in the way that I wanted to run it.
Yeah,
So
and I know this to be fact too. I grew up in a family business, right? I grew up, my aunt, my uncles worked there, my grandpa, my grandma, my mom, my dad were all in the same like little office space, right? I mean, granted, my uncle was more in the shop area working on trying to get stuff to work. My dad could drive truck or operate the Bantam crane, unload customers, and my mom could work the scale, and so they all kind of had their own roles, but it was a family, it was steeped in family, right? I mean, it was a family business of all family businesses. And then as my dad kind of eventually took over, it became less family. Some aunts, uncles left, my grandparents, it was my mom, my dad, and then they had like a couple cousins, and then my old brother-in-law was there, and then I graduated college and came back, so there was still some kind of family involved. And to this day, there's no family there, right? I mean, to your point, when you're starting a business, you go with people that you trust and that you know, and then you kind of branch it out from there. And I think, especially in a business where there's a lot of cash involved or there's a lot of like money exchanging hands and stuff, that's why people tend to go with family initially, is because they feel like they can trust those people to handle money and do all that while they're kind of getting through the process. You're not alone by any stretch of the imagination. That's just kind of the way that it goes. But then as you grow, you create opportunities for, okay, maybe I don't necessarily need that family member isn't performing or whatever that is. And then as it goes, it changes. But to your point, I don't think you're alone in going through that phase. There's a lot of hard times in my going to Christmas and Thanksgiving. When I was growing up as a kid, I didn't understand what was going on. I'm like, how come you and Uncle Robert don't get along? And my dad's like, fuck that guy, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I mean, what? He seems like a nice guy to me. Like, and then, and it wasn't that he like hated him. It's just there's so much tension all week long, right? That they couldn't even fucking sit down and eat Thanksgiving dinner together, right? And it was just like something had to give. And I think my grandpa was able to kind of help kind of split them up and do a bunch of other stuff. And today they get along fantastically, right? But there was a period of time where nobody talked to anybody. I mean, we didn't have a big family to begin with, but nobody could fucking even say hi to each other, right? So it's like it's a tricky deal to navigate for sure, especially with immediate family. So you're not alone in that regard.
So and thank you for sharing that. I know part of your story, not all of it. So yeah, thanks for the clarity on, where you guys are at today in terms of family. That's gotta be, that's what, three generations of business.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I mean, if those walls could talk about the stories that they've learned.
Yeah. 100%. And it is what it is. But like I said, I think that's the beauty of what you've done and what you're building, right? So you go through the phase of you've got your family involved. And then as you said, that now maybe I gotta change some things, right? And so, I mean, at what point do you start to change things?
So we were still renting at that time, and then I bought two warehouses. This was my first real estate acquisition. So this is in 2014. Bought 34,000 square feet of warehousing.
Okay.
It was on 4.5, 5 acres, something like that. So facility was quite deplorable. So here's another highlight reel. We did boy, I can't remember the name of the bank now or the name of the loan with the bank, but it was essentially, they're supposed to give you a liquidity round in the front end to GC and do repairs. And well, I'm talking to my banker about it. They've earmarked 750,000 for repairs, and I get the keys. I'm on cloud nine. We're going from 8,000 square feet or 9,000 to 34,000 square feet. And there's a whole story in that 8,000 square feet. We were in a 50,000 square foot warehouse with shared space with another company, which that'd be for another time potentially, but lots of lessons learned there. But so I get the keys. I'm in the new place. I'm bringing contractors through, and then I call the bank and I go, hey, I'm going to go ahead and need X amount of dollars to get this going and that going. And they're like, oh, well, that sounds great. When do you want me to send someone over to take pictures? I'm like, well, what do you need to take pictures of? He's like, well, of course, according to the deal, I need to take pictures of finished work. I can't release any funds until the work's done. So I'm like, oh shit, man. I'm like, I'm in trouble here. I'm like, I was under the impression the loan that we did gives me money. He's like, yeah, but this line item here, there's a liquidity draw that, you put zero on the line item.
Yeah.
Isn't that one of the areas that you walked me through? Well, yeah, but you're supposed to know that.
Yeah.
Well, whoops.
The
So
importance of banking in
yeah.
business. Okay.
So move the business painfully. A friend of mine had recommended we hire some guys in a recovery program just to help with the move, and he turned me on to a whole world of people in 3-quarter homes in need of work and opportunity. And so These guys were fantastic with the move, great attitudes. It was like, boy, this is amazing. We could help people out. And like, I always believe the recycling business is like such a fantastic life equalizer. It's like we were talking earlier, it's keep things like checkers and not chess. There's a
Yeah.
lot people are working for us and they're paying attention daily how we do things, whether it's our paperwork or how we communicate. There's so many lessons that can be learned and brought into your personal lives. And when you do things for pennies on the pound, I mean, there's so many lessons to take home of how to be able to save money and make better decisions. And these guys were, they're all in different parts of their lives in this 3-quarter home, and I hired 4 of them. And they all carpooled. It was like an hour drive and made a deal. And they were after the move because I exited just about everybody. I think we went from 8 or 9 people down to 2, and then hired these 4 in a car, and then trying to hire more people. And we had this guy helping me with HR because I'm like, what the hell do I know about HR or anything? You're the
Yeah.
expert. Learn from you. So the agreement was, hey, help me stand this up, make a handbook, and give me the keys when you're done. Well, he did things that were conventional to him. Again, this is what was conventional to him wasn't authentic to me. So in his mind, well, we're gonna put these job postings out. We're gonna do all these interviews. We're gonna hire 4 to 8 people at a time, and we'll pray by Friday there's at least one person standing. And in my mind, this is like normal.
Yeah.
And we'd moved. We went from 8,000 to 34,000 square feet. Like, I'm burning cash on repairs. Like, I remember looking at the checking account. It's on fumes. Like, when I say fumes, dollars, not $100 or more, less than $100. Got to make payroll. And times were tough. And we're hiring a challenging demographic to lead as well, because it's
Yeah.
very nuanced, because you don't know what's happening with people outside of work. So the guys from the recovery program, came in. This was a valuable lesson. Came in, demanded more money, and boy, I got leveraged, and it was like, shit, like, I gotta pay more, and I don't
Yeah.
have more to pay, but I don't have a choice because I need to work. Pay the
Hmm.
guys more, and then 4 weeks goes by, no call, no show, 4 people. I'm like, and meanwhile, we're cycling like onboarding 4 people, and I'm paying this consultant, and like, it's catastrophe,
Yeah.
like zero stability. And in my head, I'm just thinking like, this cannot be normal. This can't be normal anywhere.
Uh-huh.
And I went to the guy and I said, hey, thanks for your services. Today is going to be your last day with this HR project. And he was really pissed off because prior to exiting him, I just changed passwords on everything. And his feelings were hurt that I changed passwords. And he said it was too soon and too fast. And he'd never been fired before. I said, well, you're not being fired. You could just say you quit, whatever. I'm indifferent. I just need to
Yeah.
move on because this
Uh-huh.
isn't real for me. I
Not
need
sustainable.
it's not sustainable to
Yeah.
me. So I revisited and retooled what the approach was. And I found that, and this has developed a lot over the years.
So
So again,
this is what I'm the most curious about. And the
that
guys went through that scenario, family business, and then this scenario where you're bringing in 3-quarter home, halfway house, individuals to where you're at today. Because like in all like we've had this conversation over the phone before, and as you've kind of worked through your own processes, right? Like how you're trying to hire, certain individuals do certain things. I mean, because it's all kind of culminated in to where you're at today in your hiring process and how you think about the business like as a whole, right? Because I think, and the reason I want to say this is I love your story. And I think it's similar to, there's some similarities to how other people have started and gotten this industry, but where I think you've excelled and where you've kind of tried to push is you're very operational in how you think about things, but you've really like went hard at the HR process and the functionality of individuals within your company. And it sounds like because you had so much headache and heartache to begin with, right? I mean, that's kind of
Oh
what
yeah.
has forced your hand to the position that you're in today, which, and to speak to that, I mean, I'd really like to have you kind of speak to that process a little bit further for anybody out there that's kind of maybe in a similar position.
Sure. So, do you mind if I spend like 2 or 3 more minutes on the
Nope, nope,
HR
keep
guys?
going, keep going.
So there was a point in time. So the HR guy's gone, which he is a good friend, very smart, very knowledgeable. Just again, there's that authenticity. There was a disconnect, and I couldn't do it, and he's had successful businesses, and it worked for him. So again, the beauty of all of this is there's no singular path, which is why I absolutely love entrepreneurship. So at one point, we're about 80% felons on the floor. Like, and I have very weak leadership out there. I tried to build the infrastructure with 3 floor managers. Those 3 report to me, and that was through this HR guy. I realized all 3 of those managers were just covering for one another. So no information was getting me that I needed. No information made its way up to me that I actually needed to know. These guys were just covering for one another.
Mm-hmm.
So exited those 3. And then I started talking with the folks on the floor to realize, like, boy, these guys all absolutely think I'm a shitbag. So then there's this whole convincing and reprogramming and trying to earn people's trust, which is even more difficult when they've already formed an opinion of you. But I learned that, and I was hell bent on like, boy, I really want to help the community. I want to help people out. And like, I really, really think that this industry can do it better than anybody. Cause a lot of these guys, their stories were, we got into drugs or got depressed and, then they get released from prison and then they generally work at a food joint and they're working a night shift. And then all
Mm-hmm.
these people go and party and then they do drugs after. And I'm like, that's not our place. Like, so I came up with sort of a different style handbook with the intent to like protect these guys because I gave a shit. And it was like, well, we're not going to talk about sex and drugs and booze. You guys aren't going to be friends outside of work. You're not going to carpool. And whether or not these are all legal on my end, I don't give a shit because I
Yeah,
know the other way doesn't work. And I know that the other way you guys are going to lose. So if you're in it to win it, here's what this looks like. And our handbook at that point really started to expand because these guys, I mean, the guys that really know how to play the system are really fucking smart. Like, I mean,
yeah,
just looking and prodding through policy. And I finally won several of these guys over, like earned their trust. And it was like, help me understand your perspective on this policy or this procedure. And like, I remember one of the things we got hung up on was people were complaining about the attendance system because some people take a bus and some people have transportation. And they said, well, people who take the bus is unreliable. You need to give us, if we start at 8, you should give us a 30-minute buffer. I said, okay. Well, I learned from these guys how to challenge the system. So I allowed them to build the system. And guess with the tools they've provided me over the years, like I knew how to beat their system. I said, well, okay, let's say you have until 8:30. Well, who's going to see you get dropped off around the corner, not from a bus, but a car at 8:25, and you show up and you said you took the bus? And they start
yeah,
looking around the room. And I said, also, so-and-so is very mechanically inclined. Their car's not in that good a shape. And then we've got someone that's not mechanically inclined. Do they have different attendance policies? And so-and-so's got a brand new car. Should she be required to get here 15 minutes early? And the consensus was, you know what, the policy's fine just the way it is. This is getting too nuanced, but it was learning all those skills and punching through really the precision of what was being said and what was being done and how they approach things was just, it was just so brilliant. And I found it fascinating. It was something I became obsessed with, which pushed me into the realm of HR. But the first thing was like, hey, we can help the community, but I can't help the community if we don't have the proper infrastructure to support these folks. Because really, like we had nonprofit organizations that would help us source, and they would have counselors, and like you got guys that are using, and they're using.
yeah,
They've convinced their counselor they're not using, and I'm like, well, here's how I know they're using. Well, then they take a drug test and they pass. And I said, well, they know how to pass the drug test. They're
Yeah.
not
Well,
dumb.
and you've heard it said before, like guys that are like that have been involved in the system, or and this is just like anything. It's not true across the board, but there's some really super smart individuals that they're so intelligent that they've made a life of cheating the system and working the system and doing shit wrong. And then if you could get those guys or gals or whatever convinced to put all that effort, energy, and brain power towards things that can actually are beneficial to themselves, beneficial to the company, beneficial to their wife and kids, beneficial to like versus trying to find the shortcut and all the workarounds. Like those individuals, once they get their mind wrapped around that they can create just as much or more positive momentum by doing shit the right way as they can, the other way. You can really find some gems, and we've done the same thing. We have a couple of guys that are still with us today that we hired from the Boise Penitentiary, and they started with us on work release, and they've worked their way through, and we've got some great guys, and we found them just that way. But we've let a lot of them go, and a lot of them have worked their way through to the point that it just was never going to work out, and whether they were fixable or not, that's not for me to say. They weren't for us. But to that credit, we've also had a few that have like been awesome for our company. And so it takes a special kind of business, a special kind of strength in the back office to take that on and take that task of those individuals on and say, let's give them a shot, and there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of going on in our industry. People talk about getting the youth involved. I think there's a pretty good program out there for us, as an industry to get involved in some of these reform guys gals that are looking for another chance. I mean, that want out.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I look back on that, or my experience with that. I mean, we've probably brought, I don't know if I'm shooting from the cuff here, a couple hundred people, but I had set a goal to impact 1,000 lives, and we never hit it. And I realized I didn't have the skill sets, and the timing was wrong to be involved with that. It really, it was tough, but had to accept the L. But we propelled forward with the L. So it wasn't like, oh, we lost that game on to the next. No, it was like, let's evaluate what went well, what went really well, and what
Yeah.
went awful, and what could we do to push this forward. So
Would you say that one of your strengths as a company is your HR now? I mean, would you like put
yeah,
that up and say like that's one of the backbones of like one of my differentiators?
I would say our culture is our differentiator.
Okay.
And I'll talk a little bit more about what I guess how I can quantify that and how I know.
Yeah,
Um,
I like to just kind of get some, we can speed up, but ultimately, like I want you to tell people like what is your differentiator. When you tell your story, like part of my thing is being genuine about you, genuine about your story, like what makes you tick. And obviously through this conversation, I kind of have, I think hopefully everybody else kind of has a feel for what makes you tick, and it is that, the ability to change some lives. But talk about your culture. Let's talk about like the backbone of your business.
sure. I'll preface it with 60-second story. And this is sort of a newfound finding for myself, but I have an inclination for the blue collar man and woman. I want them to win. And being first generation American, I remember being young, seeing my mom. She would work second shift. She'd come home and she'd work in some pretty nasty. I don't know the details of it, but I call them sweatshops because the following morning she's got bandages on, or she's got some serious like burn marks or cuts, and it's like when you're 5, 6 years old, you don't quite understand what the hell that's about. I also remember she wasn't paid much for it, so She retired a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, but she worked for a big company here in Northeast Ohio, manufacturer that just had an awesome culture. Like they did things like I remember being little, and whenever it was my birthday, I'd get a check for however many years old I was. Like they did all these things to tie the family in. And my mom had health insurance. She had a retirement and profit share. And so when she had retired, I'm like, tell my mom, I'm like, you're living the American dream. Like, she's not rich. She's like wealthy. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's got a lot of her stuff paid off. She has money in the bank from the business. They took care of their people, and I realized like shit. My experience growing up was my mom worked for a place that took care of her. They valued her. She didn't have a high school college education, and she still did remarkably well. Um, so the goal set out for the company was like, how do we build a business where we do a hell of a lot more with less, but pay people better than average? And how do we get better than average people here? Not necessarily skills or talent; those are bonuses to me, but attitude.
Yeah.
Um, so we put a system in place that we do like a culture survey. We do an analysis on resumes. We do a first and second round interview with folks. And I always, and again, this is all personal belief. You know me well enough at this point. We've had enough conversations. There's things that I'll hold on to beliefs with or about that I can be convinced otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
certainly have me flip flop on some ideals. But I think the days of like, hey, we're going to do 4 rounds of interviews and we're going to have 7 panelists and like anybody can act. And at the end of the day, what's really going to matter is boots to the concrete on the floor, your first day and your experience. And we're so hands on and so particular from the point that we know we've got the right culture fit for the right role. Like, and we do everything ass backwards. Like conventional businesses, create a role, hire a person for that role. Like our job postings are like there's secretly a basket of roles. So then we bring candidates, we identify attitude, and then we build this role for the specific candidate, which is again is not conventional. It's stupid by most people's measures. And I could tell you today what I know is it makes it very difficult to scale the business, but I'm willing to accept that. I'm willing to go through that challenge.
You're willing
So
to you're willing to scale at a measured pace. Like to clarify that, you're willing to
yeah,
scale at a measured pace so that you can keep your culture intact. And I think that's the important piece of that, like what I took away from that.
correct. And I say at our weekly meetings, I'll fire the highest performer here with the shittiest attitude, and I'll never look back. I don't need it. I don't want it. And so we've got this hiring process that we know definitively with metrics. It's very efficient and it works very well. The core of all of that effort is because we deeply care about people. In other words, when we're interviewing people, people authentically understand as we communicate with them in the interview, it's not robotic. I don't read off of a sheet of paper. I literally ask the questions from the heart and I genuinely am interested in the person. And they'll often make some remark about that, like, you don't really know me. And I said, well, that's why you're here today. And I hope I didn't, they'll say things like, I hope I didn't say anything wrong. There is no right or wrong. There's just you. My job
Yeah.
is to evaluate mutual fit. And I want what's best for you in the absolute. And you may not believe that as somebody that doesn't know me, but believe me, I care enough about you as a perfect stranger that the last thing I want to do is put you somewhere where every day you drive, you're absolutely fucking miserable. You think that I'll tell you right now, that doesn't make me happy. And people can sniff it, smell it, sense it. They just know.
Yeah.
So that's the core element of what we do. We built processes around that, and we do all kinds of shit. Like before people start, and we're electronics recyclers, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're not Ernst and Young. Like so, before you start, you get an email from us. They'll say, "Hey, what's going to make your best first day at work? What's your best first week look like?" So we're already challenging you. You've already put your 2 weeks in, but we're going to make sure that we know you're coming.
Yeah.
Um, we do people's first day when they come in. Shame on me. I just changed this about 2 years ago. We used to go over the whole handbook with you. on your first day, which would take like 3 hours. And I would always pop in and go, if there's anything you disagree with or you think is wrong, or your perception is it's unfair, this is the time to ask the questions. Well, here we are. I realized, boy, what a way to buzzkill this excitement and experience by sitting you down for three or 4 hours. Like, I can't sit through a movie. I think I've only watched 2 or 3 movies in the last 9 years. It's very hard to sit through something. I'm like, so here we are. If there's anybody remotely close to me, they feel like they're being punished, and
Yeah.
all that energy is gone. So now we've broken it up into, like, I think 4 or 5 slivers. So it's like 30 minutes the first day. And that involves our HR generalist walking around. You meet everybody in the company. You go over all the fire exits and all the safety, but you shake everybody's hands. You look at everybody in the eyes. You get familiar with your workspace. Like, in people's first weeks, we're not judging performance at all. Like, we're just looking at how are you fitting in, and they're equivalently evaluating us. And I tell them, this is a two-way street. You heard me in the interview process. Now see if all of this holds true on the floor, because I could be completely full of shit.
Have you read the book Originals?
No.
So Jennifer Betts turned me on to this book, and in it they discuss Ray Dalio, obviously, who, I mean, for anybody that's involved in business probably knows Ray Dalio and his book Principles, right? Like, book of 200 Principles. And anyways, obviously Ray Dalio, they run this humongous hedge fund. Well, what they do is a lot of times people on your exit interview will ask you like why you left, or like what could we have done differently or whatever, right? Well, they do almost an exit interview after the first week. So they say, your first week, like what do you recognize? What do you see? What are you excited about? What would you change? Like, right now, we want to know, like, what would you change about our operation, about our business? Like, they want to know, because they kind of hang their hat on being original thinkers, right? They don't want they don't want groupthink. That, obviously you're trading stocks, index funds, you're trading, commodities, futures, they're trading. So you don't want groupthink, right? You want original thinkers that are willing to challenge existing beliefs, existing norms within a culture. They want to know, like, because they're always trying to be a step ahead of the next game. And so that just speaks to me, like, what I had just got through that chapter, and then you said that, and I'm like, oh, I can see like some very similar thought processes there. And I think that this interview, if anybody takes anything away from it, I'm gonna maybe 5 more minutes, we'll close it down. But I want people to know, like, within the recycling industry, there's so much more to it, right? Like, when we talked about having this podcast, for all I thought we might be talking about, like, your story, the what electronics recycling looks like today versus what it looks like. But I think this is a better podcast because it talks about, like, the value you're bringing to the table for individuals. Like, we could talk recycling. You want to talk scrap? I can fucking talk scrap all day long, right? But how many people are willing to sit down and say, like, this is my passion, this is what I care about. Recycling aside, we're not Ernst & Young. Like, we're tearing stuff apart, we're shredding, we're creating commodities, we're keeping stuff out of landfills. I mean, we could have that conversation. But how many, like, real companies out there can say we hang our hat on the strength of our HR? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like that's that's a differentiator, right? And in business, when you're thinking about marketing, or you're thinking about, like, how do I sell my business is different than the electronics recycler down the street or the big national, brand. I feel like you got to find that thing, what's that thing for you? And in your case, like, I'd bet pretty heavily that that's going to be culture. It's going to be HR. It's going to be, like, the people like coming to work and being there. And that's a fucking differentiator, and it's a big one. And so I'm hopeful that people get that out of this podcast. It's not, I mean, You got to find that thing, guys. Like you want to be different. You want to think different. Whatever that, that old Apple commercial, think different. That's you, man. And so I tip my hat to you for going down that path with me.
Thank you. It's definitely the road less traveled because I think most people are uninspired by it. Again, it's about what everybody's individual win is as the entrepreneur, and just my upbringing and tying those experiences growing up with the company my mother worked for and seeing the lifestyle she could live now as a result of that hard work. They didn't need to do all that for her, and she didn't need to do everything she did for them. So that was really, really inspiring for me, that it's like, money's really, really important. To me, it's not everything. We need it, yes, but if we have happy people here, if people can be their authentic selves at work and fit in, like, we're not an organization of lemmings, and it's not a bunch of duplicates of me and my personality. There's nobody here like me, which is great.
Yeah,
But
that's how you build a
know,
business.
in that same breath, it's like, well, people can just be themselves and do good work that they enjoy to work, and they've got a platform to grow and or excel or stay in the role they're at for now. And they can bet that we're going to be here tomorrow. There's not going to be any sweeping layoffs, and they know year over year over year over year, we continue to grow and we continue to reinvest. So I'll leave you with a couple of quick metrics. We do this, a book I read, I think 2017, called Worth Doing Wrong, by Arnie Melham. Have you read that?
No, but I'm gonna put it on my list.
First book that I read about culture. I was obsessed with culture since like 2012. And even back then, my mentor was like, "You're too small of a company to worry about culture." And I said, "Thanks for that feedback, but I don't believe it." And then I finally ran across that book through one of my peer groups as the first book that spoke to me. Like, basically, you're the constant in your organization. Um, so you need to build a culture around you. And I was finally, I was trying to do culture all these different ways. And like, this was the first thing that worked for me. One of the things that he had done was this morale survey, which is a score of 1 to 10. Employees will circle a number, and if it's 6 or less, they have to write why is morale so low for the week. We've modified it slightly, but we've been doing that since 2018. So I've got 5 years of metrics tracking, technically two scores. One is the morale score average as a company, and the participation rate, because it's not required and it doesn't impact anybody's job duties or obligations. Like, you don't have to do it. So if you don't feel like doing it, don't fill it out. But we're going to track what percentage of people do. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going off of memory, but in 2018, our average score was an 8.07. 2022 was 9.17. Participation rate was around 56%, and I believe we were 81% in 2022. Morale never declined year over year, and through COVID, there was a slight dip, and then a significant improvement into 2021 and 2022. We attritioned some folks because, remote work and all these opportunities everywhere, people were paying out the wazoo. So we did lose some people. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But a tremendous win for us in that measurement system, and people knowing we care. Last year, we had 3 weeks in a row of a declining score from like 8.9, and it slid down, I believe, to 8.3. And I stopped operations, pulled everybody in for a whole company meeting. And then 2 hours later, we got through everything we needed to get to. And then we were back in the nines. And when I had seen our 9.17 for 2022 with that high participation rate, in my head, I'm all about continual improvement. I go, man, this is going to be tough to extract. My goal is 9.18.
Yeah.
Like, this is tough to extract because you'll never win everybody. Q1 average this year was 9.41. Q2 was 9.35, with participation rates at 96% and 92%. Like,
that's awesome, man.
people are doing the right things. We're doing the right work. And as you know, this has been some seriously challenging times in the last 3 years. For me personally, as the business owner, has been some of the most trying times as a business owner, because it's not about just getting hands to show up to work and feet to show up to work. You need somebody to use what's between their ears, and to bring their heart to the table to show that they're going to be vested into something they care about. And we're getting better and better every day about finding that.
I love it. There's more to recycling than meets the eye. Like, it's not like even a slogan. It's just there's more going on behind the scenes, right? Than people could even fathom. And like I had a whole slew of other questions to ask, but at the end of the day, like I want to end on a good note. Like I want to end right to right there where people you built a culture, you built a business, not just on what's the price of gold or silver or copper. Today you built a business that'll last simply because you found people and you found a way to make them give a shit about what they do every day. And that's as much of a win as anything in our industry. And so I appreciate you taking the time and sitting down and going through that with me, Mario. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you and pick your brain about how they could make build their culture up a little stronger, get their employees a little more engaged, what's the best way to get a hold of you, man?
Sure. They could email me at mario@securerecycling.com.
Awesome. Thanks for the time, man. And until next time, have a great day.
Thanks. Appreciate you, brother. Take care.
Absolutely.